Victor Teo. He's an assistant professor at the University of Hong Kong. Victor, Michelle just mentioned rival countries have disputed the territory in the South China Sea for centuries, but seems like the tension has increased in recent years. Why is this the case?
Yes, actually, when I was going to school in the 1990s, even though that the claims are made by various claimants, South China Sea was pretty much a very peaceful place. It's not like now. So the origins, to link back to what Michelle was saying, the tensions in South China Sea really got stoked up in 2014 when Secretary Hillary Clinton started to say that the United States had core interests in South China Sea, and that's when this whole South China Sea thing got internationalized. It became not only a dispute between the claimants in Southeast Asian states and China, but also it became something that came into the purview of the United States and also the US-Japan alliance. And that's when the Japanese and the Americans started to be more directly involved. So in that respect, it's actually a regional territorial dispute that has got internationalized. And in the context of the developing tensions between China and US, we are seeing more and more of these issues being dragged to the fore. So now South China Sea, is part of the arsenal of issues that the Americans are using to put pressure on China. And that's why we're seeing all these daily or weekly statements coming out of Washington. The fact of the matter is that I think Southeast Asian states and the Chinese are working out the disputes, and they are most of countries in the region do not want to see a conflict over the islands. So yeah, these statements by the United States don't really help.
Right. China claims, as I just mentioned, most of these strategic waters as its own territory, but many would disagree. Vietnam, the Philippines, Taiwan, Malaysia. So who claims what? And what's the significance of South China Sea in particular for all of them?
Well, it's like what has been said. There are claims to resources, there are claims to territory like the islands, as well as the resources in the sea and on the islands, but more in the sea. But most importantly, I think for most countries, and especially for the United States, is the waterways they're concerned about, because South China Sea links actually Northeast Asia to Southeast Asia to the Indian Ocean. So for most countries, that the right to navigate in those waterways is extremely important. So it's not just trade that goes through the sea, but also the lifelines of energy, shipping of energy supplies from the Middle East to say Japan or China or Korea that passes through these seas. That is really, really important. The Chinese have a claim, what's the famous 9 dotted lines, that is based on maps that are drawn a long time ago. It's not just the Chinese. I think the Republic of China, if you look at the Taiwanese maps, they also have roughly exaggerated claims. Most of the Southeast Asian nations claim part of that area. So when there are sections when the maps their claims overlap, but for Chinese, I think the Chinese claims tend to overlap with most everybody, and so that's why it's upsetting to the Southeast Asian nations. But like I've said earlier, it's really something that it's either something that you put on paper or something that you actively enforce. And I think up to the 1990s, most of the countries that are disputing these islands are very lax in enforcement. So there's never actually been a confrontation, except for 1 or 2 cases involving Vietnam.
Right. This is exactly what I wanted to discuss further. I mean, harsh response from the U.S. and then again from China on that statement from Mike Pompeo saying that Beijing is bullying everyone. But what can we expect in the coming days? Can we expect some kind of military action in the area?
Okay. two things. I think we have to separate this. First of all, the United States is not party to any of the disputes, meaning the U.S. herself is not a claimant, active claimant. So U.S. does not lay claim to either the islands or the waterways in the dispute. It actually has no standing insofar the legal dispute is concerned. The second thing is the United States is also not party to the United Nations Convention Law on the Sea. So it's the country that has not signed or that's not ratified being a party to the UCLOS. So it's ironic that it's always talking about international law when it doesn't actually endorses the law itself. So, but insofar when the Chinese are concerned, I think the Chinese preference way of settling the dispute is to talk to the various countries. What the Chinese are hoping is that the countries, the smaller Southeast Asian countries, will not try and bring the United States into a dispute, to internationalize the dispute. Now, as much as this is bad to hear, China is also actually a legitimate claimant to the dispute. Like the smaller countries, the big country also has a right to claim. So I think what the Chinese and ASEAN states really want is to have a platform to work out the conduct of the various parties in the dispute. So right now, the ASEAN Regional Forum, one of the Southeast Asian nations, security forum every year, is hosting dialogues on this. There are other, track 1.5 semi-official track things that are being done. But I do not actually see a shooting war unless it's between the Chinese and the United States.
Okay, Victor, Theo, I appreciate that insight for us here at TRT World.